Yeah, I've been waiting for this.
Hey everyone, it is Press Any Button, and we are back for our final part of our action adventure series. It's been a long journey, but we are finally here. We're going to create a menu so we can select our different levels, and then we're going to have a game over animation and a little game over UI element pop up, and that's going to kick us back out into the main menu so that we can try again. So let's get straight into it. Today, I'm going to be doing something I haven't done for a while. It's going to be LiveCom Day. Let's get straight into it. We're going to go File, New Scene, and there we have it. We've created a new scene. Now this is all good. I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a UI element, and that's going to be my canvas. My canvas comes with an event system, so that's all looking good. We don't have to do anything in the inspector. And I'm going to go to UI canvas once I have my canvas selected, and then as a child I'm going to have a image, so UI image as a child of our canvas. I'm then going to select the source image for our UI element here, and that's going to be some image that I've imported previously. Now, to kind of go over this one more time, because this might be a little issue. When you import your image, you're going to import like a PNG or whatever, anything that you make in like a photo editing software like Photoshop or even Paint, right? You can import into your assets folder by just dragging into your assets folder, drag it into wherever is best for like how you've organized your files. When you do this, the texture type is going to appear as default to start off with. What we want is 2D and UI so that we can interact with it using Unity UI. So we're going to select Sprite 2D and UI, and then it will give you the option to apply that. Let's get straight back to our image. So it's quite squashed right now, so we're going to set native size, and I want it to be bigger, so I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to scale this up, and we're just going to keep scaling up till it gets to a point that we kind of like. And then I'm going to use the anchors here to just position that in the center. There we are. So that covers all of my game viewport, which is fantastic. And then I'm going to click on my canvas again, right click, go into UI, and we're going to go to button. And we're going to do this again, or we can hit Control C on this button and then Control V, and then we have another button that is a child of our canvas. I'm going to call this button Gun Nav. And then I'm going to call this other one Melee Nav. There we are. Now under our buttons we have text options. So you can actually see in the viewport here where we have the scene, you can see that I moved my text, but I can move the entire thing, and I can scale that up and all the such. So what I'm going to do to keep these somewhat uniform, I'll keep them in the center using the anchors, and then I'm going to scale them up. I'm gonna increase everything by 2. We don't have to increase it on the Z-axis because this is a 2D element essentially, so doing that won't really make a difference. Fantastic. Now both of our buttons say button, and that's not going to be helpful for our actual player. So how are we going to get past that? Well, we have the option to select our text, which has appeared as a child of our button as default, and here we can change the text that appears. So I'm going to call this Gun Run Menu 2, just so we can see there's some differentiation. There we are. Actually, let's do something fun. I'm going to call this Gun Run 2 Boogaloo. There we go. And then Melee what? Medley 2 Boogaloo. Fantastic. And you can see that the text has changed. Now we can also change the font. When you go to change the font, you're going to realize that Unity provides you with Arial only. What you're going to want to do is import your own font like I've done here. Now I won't show that in this video, but maybe I'll post a short. Essentially, you just want to take the files for your font and drag them into the assets folder, and Unity will know what to do with them from there. So if you download a font from the internet, or you know where your fonts folder is, copy that into your assets folder. Once it's unzipped and everything, Unity will know what to do with that, and you'll just have your fonts imported. So I've got my Nintendo-esque font here, so I'm going to select that instead of the default Arial font, which hurts my feelings every time I look at it. So there we are. We've changed our buttons, we've changed our font. Now we can play the game, but it's pretty predictable what's going to happen. Absolutely nout. Now, what's good is that our buttons are working. We're able to interact with them, but we want something to happen when we interact with them. So let's create a script to attach to our button. So you're going to select your actual button, and then you're going to go to Add Component, and you're going to go New Script, but I already have a level select script, or select level script. So you know the drill. We're going to edit that in Visual Studio. Okay, so this is a super simple script. We're here in Visual Studio. The only thing you're going to really want to add is Unity Engine.Scene Management, because you're using all of these other things, but we need to specifically say that we want to be able to use all the functionality whereby we switch scenes and stuff, and that's inbuilt into Unity. So Unity Engine.Scene Management will give us that functionality. And then just moving down, we've got a public string called level. Now, string is a data type, which means that it's a type of way that we represent information. This particular data type deals with lists of characters. I'm not sure if that varies depending on the language, but essentially you have individual characters which make a word. If my word is word, W-O-R-D are all individual characters, and all of that together makes a string. But W by itself in speech marks is also a string. We have our string, which is a word, right? Variable name for that word is called level, but the actual word can vary. And then we've got SceneManager.LoadScene level.toString. So at some point, we're going to input what we want level to be, the string that we want level to be. So that can be gun run or melee medley. And then what this little method here, the toString, does is it extracts that string information so that we can actually use it. So it's going to load the scene depending on the string that we've inputted, because it's going to pull that out of the area that we've inputted that string. Just a complicated way of saying we're going to be able to type up which levels we want to navigate to in a second. So we can close this and return to Unity. What do we want to do first? Well, we want to figure out what levels we're navigating to. Hopefully at this point you might have a sample level or something that you've been messing around with. I have gun run and I've got melee. And so what I'll do is I'm going to type them exactly as I see them saved down here in the project view. So now that toString function is going to pull that information and say, all right, you're wanting to go to gun run. Is there a scene called gun run? And when we click this button, we're going to go to that scene called gun run, which is this scene right here. We can do the same with our melee level. So if I go add component, select level and melee, then we're all set up for that. Except there's a couple more things that we need to do. We want these events to happen when we click our button. So we're going to use the onClick method here, and it's provided us a pretty nice interface. All we need to do is hit that plus icon. Then I'm going to drag this little section with our level select into the space provided. And then where it says no function, we're going to go level select, open scene. And that's pretty much it. And we're going to do the same. So open that up, runtime only, there's no object, let's drop in an object, and then select level, open scene. Fantastic. And we've got everything in a state where it should be able to work. However, there's just one final thing that we need to do. Our buttons are working, but we need to address what scenes are going to be navigated to. And that means including them in the build of our game. So we're going to go to File, and then we're going to go to Build Settings. And at this point, you want to have your Scenes folder open. And then we're going to select any scene that we want in our current build. So I'm going to select these three. I'm going to start off with Melee 2, and then Control and select the rest. So my first scene, Scene 0 is Melee 2, and then the rest can just be as they are. So, and we can see it's scenes/melee, scene/gun run, just as we typed it before. And then once we've done that, we can simply exit our build settings. And if I play the game, I should be able to navigate to my different levels. So let's click on gun run and see what happens. Fantastic. And we can see that my scene is gun run, and gun run has a ton of different enemies in it. And then let's try that again. So we'll start the game. We're in menu 2, Melee Medley 2, and you can see that I've navigated to Melee. So that's the first part of everything done. Let's figure out a way that we can get back to the main menu without exiting out of our game, because, you know, our actual player won't have that kind of utility, and at the same time it will teach us some important lessons. So in this tutorial, I'm proposing that we have a game over screen, a little bit of flashing UI, and a death animation on our character, and then after some time we'll navigate back to the menu. Let's set that up real quick. So to begin with, I want to go to one of my scenes, and we're going to access the canvas. Now you can see on the canvas I have my game over text. Now this text is deselected because we're going to activate it at a certain point. The text also has an animation associated with it, so it flashes and does the such. And I'll just go over how we can do that. Instead of going back and creating another thing that says game over, what I'm going to do is do a side-by-side and kind of vary it up a little bit. So we're going to right click on canvas, UI and text, because text is what we want. And then we're going to call this game over subtext. And just like before, we can edit our text over here. So I'm going to say try again, exclamation. We're going to change the font, and let's change how that's located. There we are, in the center, and we're going to make that slightly bigger, but not as big as our game over text here. Great, so we have this new UI text element. Let's animate it so it looks dynamic, and then we'll get into some other things. So with my text selected, we go over to the animation tab here, and I'm going to click create. And then I get to create a new animation, and I'll just save it at the base layer of my assets folder, across and fade is what I'll call it, because we want this text element to move across and eventually fade. So what I'm going to do is add an initial property. So let's take a look at where this kind of sits in reference to our entire canvas. I want this to go back and forth just under where it says game over. The first thing we'll do then is adjust the position. So we'll get a nice round position there. So I'm thinking -210 for position, and then I'll enable recording mode so that we track each one of the movements that we do. Now initially I'm going to dictate where our text is, so we'll just, there we are. So I want this to be at position 210. That is where our text will be, and then after, let's say 15 frames, because I believe we're moving at about 30 frames a second. 15, where are you? There we go. We are going to go to position 0, and then we are going to go to position 210, doing all of this on the x-axis, let's play that animation out. So just exit the recording so it doesn't mess with me unexpectedly. That's alright. It's a bit fast though. Let's space these out. We're gonna, using the scroll wheel, I can get to see more of the timeline by scrolling down, and if I scroll up then I can zoom into specific parts of our timeline. And let's just play that animation out again. I like that. Then we're going to do the reverse of what we've done. So let's go to frame 130. Hit record mode. And then we'll say, okay, we're going to go back to position 0 here. Or we could also Control C, go to the frame that we want. So that is frame 200, and then Control V. Well, sorry, 2 on the timeline, frame 120. And there we have it. We have our animation. So let's play that out. It goes back and forth. That's pretty good. But we can do a little bit more with it. As you saw, we had with the other element, I was changing the colors a little bit. So again, recording mode is your bestie in this scenario. I'm going to go to the color picker, and we have this like black right now. And if I change it ever so slightly, I mean, it's 50-50-50. If I change it ever so slightly, I create the keyframe, and then I can go back and just get that all sorted again. So we want to start off with that black, and then I'd say we don't want to flash too quick, but I'd like to flash to white, and that's going to add that frame for us because we're in record mode. And then we can exit record mode, make sure we don't record any actions that we don't want recorded, and then Control C, Control V, that little keyframe. So then we can see that we go back and forth and change color at the same time. Fantastic! The visual stuff is done, but games design is harder than just creating pretty things. We gotta code some stuff, which means that we are gonna go back into Visual Studio. Before we leave the inspector for this text element, I am going to deselect it so that it's not active at the start of our game, and the same goes with the game over text element that we have there. Then I'm going to go over to my Cat Beyond. I'm going to Control S, so I've just saved the scene real quick. And all of this new UI stuff we've dealt with in the player health script, so I'm just going to open that up and we can edit it. Alright, so we've made some changes to our player health script, and all of those changes are featured from this point onwards. So we have a reference to our animator, we have a reference to the player collider, which I'll explain why we need that, and the rigid body, I'll explain why we need that later. So we go into Void Awake, we access all of those things, attach variable names to them so that we can work with them without having to type this full line of code each time. We've got the animator, we've got the collider of our player character, and their rigid body. And now we're going to skip past Void Update because we need to explain the death method first. This method plays once we reach a state that we define as death. So void death, the name's not important, you could call it anything, but that's what we're calling this method. So void death, we're going to first disable the player collider, and at the same time we're going to disable the effect that gravity has on our player. These two lines are important because if we don't disable the collider, then when we want the death animation to play out, there'll be a conflict because we're getting hit by our enemies still, because they still attack us when we have no health. And what happens is the death animation will be playing, and then we'll snap back to our hurt animation, then death, hurt, death, hurt, death, hurt. By disabling the collider, we get rid of the functionality of void on trigger enter other.collider that we used. So all of this is cancelled out by that one simple line because we've deactivated our collider. Now we want to deactivate gravity also, because once we get rid of the collider, we're not colliding with anything, we're not touching anything, which means that if we still have gravity affecting us, we're going to fall through the floor. We don't want that. So we've set that to false. And the next line will need me to scroll up and talk about where we have this object, which is game over. So public text game over. Text is the UI element text, right? And so we've created a container for this thing, and we drop it in the inspector later on. That says that game over becomes enabled. Remember, we toggled it off because we only want to see the game over text once a game over actually happens, once our health goes to 0 and we're in this state of death. And then we start a timer, set that to true, and then run through a method which we have below. This method is called wait to change, and it's a little timer that we have. It's kind of like an artificial loading screen, and it lets us see the death animation and lets us see the game over screen before we go over back to the main menu. So wait to change, it takes as an argument a bool, which is our start timer, and it says if start timer is true, so if we've said, as we do in the death method, start timer is true, then a timer that we've established up here, public float timer, and I've set that to 5 seconds, is going to decrement at time delta time, which means the timer is going to go down by a second, and we've set our timer to 5, so it's going to take 5 seconds for all of this to happen. And then if the timer is less than or equal to 0, then we access the scene manager.load scene and then menu. Remember, we used the toString before, but we can explicitly say the name of the scene. So if I do menu 2, then it would navigate over to menu 2 because that's the menu scene that I've got in my current build. And then we set timer to false. So this method starts to count down from 5, and then our death animation starts to play out. I won't go into our death animation this time around because we've done a lot of animations. I trust you guys know how to implement new animations into your character and use them. All I'm going to show you is the transitions for those animations. So the important parts here are using Unity.scene management, public text game over, you want a timer, you want a bool called start timer, reference to the animator, reference to the collider and the rigid body. You set that up in void awake, and then you have this method that we've returned to, and then the rest we've spoken about, which brings us right over to void update, where we establish a new bool, and that is called dead, and we're going to type that in our parameters exactly like that. And we're going to say it's false to begin with, and if our current health depletes and it's less than 0, then we're going to go into that death animation where we anim.setBool dead to true. So if you've made any edits there, or if you've just added that script, you'll want to save it, of course. We'll return to Unity and see what's left for us to do. Okay, so we're in the inspector, and you can see that you have your health slider, which is standard practice. But now you've got your game over text, you've got your timer, start timer is the bool. We're not going to touch those. I mean, you can edit this, make the sort of like death state play out for a little bit longer. Instead of using my game over text that I've already used, I'm going to use the subtext and hopefully illustrate to you how those changes have been made. Going over to the animator for my character, we want to talk about the transitions to our death state. So it's very simple. We just go from any state and we use the bool dead. So as you know, you go to parameters, and because it's a bool, we're going to create a new bool, and that bool is all the way down here. So I get to name it whatever I want. Yeah, let's do that because it's not actually one that we're going to use. And so say that was my dead bool, then that's what we'd be able to use for transitions now. I'm going to delete that because we are not using it. I'm going to go back to just looking at my character. So here's the transition, and it says when dead is true, we transition into our death animation, and my death animation just looks like this. And so that's just my death animation, and I made that in Blender in like 5 minutes. Great, now we brought it all together in Gunrun. let's play our game and see what happens. So I'm going to go to menu 2. I'm just going to check the build settings, make sure that all the scenes that I'm going to be navigating to are correct. So we play the game. I'm going to go to gun run, and I'm going to use my speedrunning hacks to get there a bit quicker. Oh, they failed me this time around. Oh, no. Anyway, we're going to get shot at. So they are shooting at us. Shooting at us. We take a knee, and it says try again. And our character, he's not feeling so good. And there we are. We go back to the main menu. This has been another press any button tutorial. Thank you for entertaining this, because this has been a long time running. I'm going to be really trying to finish off these old projects, just because they've been in the way of some really brilliant things that I've learned and I really want to do now. And I'm really not showing you guys the best that I can, offer, and the best that we can learn about together. So once we get past run and gun, and sort of like a transition point is going to be our rail shooter series, then we can get into some really fun stuff. But as always, if you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, comment, request, whatever you need to make sure that these tutorials can help you as best as possible. Otherwise, press on and keep creating.